So TikTok, the world's most addictive social media app from China, is going to be sold to the US. At least that's what Western mainstream news headlines would have you believe. In late October 2025, it was indeed announced that the US and China had reached a final deal for Beijing to approve the transfer of TikTok's US operations to a consortium of US and allied investors, valuing it around $14 billion. It's estimated that the terms of the sale could be finalized in the next few months, though it is entirely possible that we will see delays depending on private negotiations from both sides. This means that hundreds of millions of TikTok users in the US who are absolutely glued to the app can breathe a sigh of relief. The alternative would have been a nationwide ban under a new US national security law, a shutdown that likely would have sparked massive backlash from Gen Z Americans. But if you just dig a little deeper and look into what's really going on, you might realize that what's being framed as this big win for the United States is nowhere near as simple as it looks. As you'll soon find out, there are so many layers to this deal that you have to wonder, if the public knew what the deal actually involved, would they still support it? Because while this deal is certainly framed as a way to protect your privacy from a foreign government, our research suggests that data security is just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath the surface, the real battle is about something most people have heard of, but almost no one truly understands: algorithms. The algorithm is what's recommending this very video you're watching right now. It is quietly shaping our lives in ways we're not even aware of. And it turns out, China cracked the code on this technology long ago, driven by unique market conditions and a cultural environment that's very different from the West. But to understand why this specific algorithm has become the center of a geopolitical tug of war, we have to first lift the hood and look at the engine itself. You see, most people assume that TikTok just got lucky, that it was an accidental cultural phenomenon that happened to catch on with the global teenagers. But the truth is, the rise of TikTok wasn't an accident. It was the result of a deliberate, decade-long engineering crusade by a Chinese company called ByteDance that started with nothing but a very different vision of the internet. To understand the full context of the TikTok sale, we first have to explore how TikTok and, more importantly, its parent company ByteDance were built in the first place. Before we dive in, we need to talk about how you can stop the rest of the internet from gathering your data. Because whether it's a Chinese algorithm, your local internet service provider, or data brokers in the US, your online activity is constantly being tracked, even if you're browsing in incognito. That's why I personally use CyberGhost VPN to take back control. CyberGhost encrypts 100% of your internet traffic and reroutes it through secure servers in over 100 different locations, which means no one, not your internet service provider, not your workplace or school, and not even CyberGhost themselves can see what you're doing online. This becomes especially important when you're in public Wi-Fi in airports, cafes, or hotels. You know, some of the easiest places for your data to get intercepted. But with CyberGhost turned on, everything you do is protected inside a secure, encrypted tunnel. And because my work often involves accessing news sites and platforms from different parts of Asia, CyberGhost also lets me switch my virtual location instantly. So even if a site is geo-blocked depending on where I'm traveling, I can still get the information I need. And I can use it on up to 7 devices at the same time. As a bonus, CyberGhost also unlocks geo-restricted content on more than 40 streaming platforms like Netflix, Amazon Prime, and Disney+. CyberGhost is offering our viewers an 84% discount plus 4 extra months for free. And it's all backed by a 45-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it completely risk-free. Just scan the QR code or click the link in the description to get the special offer and start protecting your digital life today. Now, let's get back to the deep dive. In the winter of 2012, there was a 29-year-old Chinese man in Beijing who knew he was standing at a fork in the road. Prior to that point, he had graduated from Nankai University, where he studied software engineering after switching from microelectronics. So he was definitely smart, but the career path he had taken up until then was not conventional by any stretch of the imagination. He joined the travel startup called Kushuin as one of its early engineers, eventually becoming its technical director. helping build out the company's search features and core infrastructure. After that, he did a brief stint at Microsoft, but felt stifled by big company bureaucracy and left to work at smaller, more dynamic startups. His name was Zhang Yiming, and he would go on to found ByteDance, the parent company behind TikTok and one of the most valuable Chinese internet companies in history. But before ByteDance, he co-founded several startups, including a real estate search engine company called 99Fang. 99Fang was not a complete failure. It attracted users, raised capital, and gave him his first real taste of being a founder. But after several years, Zhang felt that online real estate wasn't the opportunity he wanted to spend the next decade on because he could see what was coming. China already had hundreds of millions of desktop internet users, but by 2012, the iPhone 4 and cheap Android phones were flooding the Chinese market. And for the first time, massive number of people were accessing the internet primarily through their phones, not their PCs. Looking at this new mobile world, Zhang noticed something immediately. On a desktop, you've got a big screen and a keyboard. You can sit down, type, and search for whatever you want. On a smartphone, you're on the subway. You're tired, and you're not going to type long keywords into a tiny search bar. So Zhang formed a radical thesis. In the mobile age, information shouldn't wait to be searched. It should find you. Zhang made a choice to step down as CEO of 99Fang and start over. In March 2012, he founded ByteDance and started building what would become Jinru Toutiao. Today's headlines: a mobile news app powered by recommendation algorithms instead of human editors. There's a widely told story that in early 2012, he met an investor named Wang Chong in a coffee shop, sketched out this idea on a napkin, and convinced her with the clarity of his thinking to become one of ByteDance's first backers when many others were skeptical. Early ByteDance was still a scrappy startup, a small team, limited resources, and a founder trying to convince the world that an AI-driven feed could beat traditional portals and search. Zhang and a few engineers experimented aggressively, launching and testing multiple apps at the same time. Jokes, memes, and other niche verticals, all built around the same core idea of algorithmic recommendation, just to see what would stick. One of those early products was called Implied Jokes, a feed of humorous user-generated memes that quickly built a cult following and gave ByteDance its first real taste of traction. But Zhang wasn't satisfied because he noticed right away that memes make you laugh, but they don't make you stay. He realized that if he was going to build something truly scalable and defensible, he needed a system that could keep users deeply engaged for hours, not just seconds or minutes. And that realization became the starting point for everything ByteDance would build next. In August 2012, ByteDance launched Toutiao, which translates to headlines. At the time, every major news app in China was driven by human editors deciding what was important. Zhang completely flipped that model on its head and built an algorithm that broke human behavior down into dozens of cold metrics. How many milliseconds you paused, whether you scroll past politics or tap on celebrity gossip, which topics made you linger and which you swiped away. So you can see just how early Zhang was to the algorithm game. This was 2012, and Zhang's bet was that the algorithm would know you better than you know yourself. And boy, did it pay off. By feeding people exactly what their subconscious wanted, rather than what they said they wanted, the app exploded. Within months, they had millions of daily users and the engagement metrics were off the charts. But there was a problem. They were growing so fast that they were bleeding cash. Because, servers are expensive. Engineers are expensive. And in 2013, despite the user numbers, Zhang was running on fumes. So in order to raise additional money, Zhang went door to door to the venture capitalists in Beijing and Silicon Valley. And he got slammed. In 1 month, Zhang met with over 30 investors. He was rejected by almost all of them who thought that this shy engineer was delusional. They said, a machine cannot curate culture. This is where the story takes a turn that most people don't know about. One of the investors who Zhang was introduced to was a young Singaporean man named Zhou Shoutsu. Today, you know him as the polished CEO of TikTok who testified before the US Congress. Joe wouldn't officially join the company as a CFO and later TikTok CEO until 2021, nearly 8 years later. But back in 2013, he wasn't an employee at ByteDance. He was a partner at DST Global, a leading investment firm with deep ties to global tech deals. Unlike many others, Joe realized that Zhang wasn't just building a news app, he was building a prediction engine. Joe saw the future and pushed his firm to back ByteDance with around $10 million in funding. With that capital secured, Toutiao was off to the races and rapidly passed 100 million users. Its ad revenue went from essentially zero to well into the hundreds of millions of US dollars over the following years, turning ByteDance into one of China's most powerful advertising and data-driven platforms. Bear in mind, this was still before 2016 when ByteDance hadn't even gotten into video yet. But they already had one of the world's most sophisticated content recommendation algorithms. How do we know that? Their algorithms made the experience so addictive that the average Toutiao user was spending about 76 minutes a day on the platform, which is insane. That's like movie-length engagement and longer than most people spend on Instagram or Facebook today just reading news articles. Now, you have to understand the Chinese social media landscape at the time. ByteDance was growing like crazy, but they were swimming in a shark tank dominated by one of the biggest tech companies in China, Tencent. Tencent is the parent company behind WeChat, the messaging app that evolved into this super app. By 2016, they already had over 800 million users. Along with other tech giants Alibaba and Baidu, Tencent controlled the Chinese internet. And around that time, unofficial reports surfaced that Tencent and other tech giants explored acquiring ByteDance, valuing the company at roughly $8 billion US. So what did Zhang do? He reportedly turned down all the offers and told his team that the offers only reflected the value of their users for the next 24 months, while he believed they were building something worth far, far more. Furious at the rejection, Tencent went to war. And what they did to ByteDance next would change the fate of TikTok forever, forcing the creation of an algorithm so powerful that even the US government would eventually be afraid of it. So at this point, we all know how addictive social media platforms and doom scrolling can be. But what if I told you that TikTok literally took this to the next level with a weapon-grade algorithm? And ironically, we have WeChat's parent company Tencent to thank for pushing them there. You see, to understand TikTok at the fundamental level, you first have to understand what it isn't, and it's not WeChat. So WeChat, built by Tencent, is often referred to as this ultimate super app in China that allows you to video chat with friends, pay bills, order food delivery, book taxi, and even shop online. But at its core, it started out as a simple messaging app, the first of its kind in China that was built around your real-life friends. In the tech world, this is called a social graph, which means that the entire platform is structured around who you know. Similar to WeChat, the biggest social media platforms in the US, like Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, were all originally built on this exact same foundation, the social graph. Whether it was friends, followers, or subscribers, the algorithm's primary job was to show you what your network was doing. For example, before TikTok exploded into the mainstream, if a YouTube channel you subscribed to uploaded a new video, that's what you were likely to be recommended first. Why? Because you subscribed to the channel and it was treated as part of your network within the confines of the social graph. Facebook even famously announced in January 2018 that it would start reprioritizing friends and family content over advertisers and publishers. That's not how ByteDance developed its algorithm. With its super addictive news app Toutiao, the goal was simply to show you what you wanted to read regardless of who you knew. After all, reading the news shouldn't depend on what your friends are doing, right? And this approach continued when Zhang saw that the next wave was going to be video. He predicted that short videos wouldn't just reshape daily life. They would become the primary channel for information and entertainment for years to come. So in 2016, ByteDance launched Douyin, the original Chinese version of TikTok based on the exact same content-first philosophy they had already perfected with Toutiao. In the tech world, this is known as the interest graph. The interest graph means that the app doesn't care who your friends are. It doesn't care who you follow. In fact, you could use Douyin or TikTok for years and never follow a single person, and the user experience would actually get better because the algorithm is purely tailoring itself to your needs, not your social obligations. But here's the thing. Even a potent content-first algorithm needs a kickstart. It needs distribution. Most apps solve this problem by pivoting off an existing network. For example, Instagram grew into a giant specifically because it let you find your friends from Facebook. And initially, Douyin relied on WeChat for the same viral boost. But remember the war I mentioned earlier? As competition between Tencent and ByteDance intensified, WeChat eventually restricted Douyin links from being shared on the platform. Overnight, Douyin lost access to China's most powerful social graph. It was a moment of existential pressure because they were effectively cut off from a walled garden of a nearly billion users. This blockade forced ByteDance to double down on the interest graph approach. They were like, fine, we don't need your friend network. We don't need social sharing. We just need an algorithm so accurate that once you open the app, you never want to leave. And it worked. Thanks to a powerful engineering breakthrough I'll get into shortly, by 2017, Douyin had exploded into the mainstream consciousness in China. It hit 100 million users in just 1 year. For context, that milestone took Facebook 4 years to reach. Douyin wasn't just popular, it was a cash cow. It completely rewired the advertising market in China, convincing thousands of small businesses to increase their ad budgets, thousands of creators to pay to boost their content, and millions of users to watch more ads. Meanwhile, the social media battle among China's internet giants, Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent, was getting even more intense. They were locked into a fierce cage match fighting over the domestic market. ByteDance knew that they couldn't just rely on Douyin fighting for market share in China forever. They needed to go global. But here was the dilemma for Zhang. He knew that if he simply expanded Douyin to the world, he would run into a wall: Chinese censorship. He realized he couldn't have American teenagers uploading videos that broke Chinese censorship laws. And conversely, there was no way for ByteDance to enforce Chinese censorship rules on American teenagers. So he made a decision that virtually no other Chinese tech companies had dared to execute. He decided to clone his own company. In early 2017, ByteDance launched an international version of Douyin called TikTok. To the user, TikTok and Douyin looked exactly the same. They used the same logo. They used the same algorithm. But strategically, they were parallel universes. They lived on different servers. They had different databases. They never touched. One was designed to survive the Chinese government. The other one was designed to conquer the West. So armed with this two-app strategy, ByteDance quietly expanded overseas, and they moved quickly. Their first move was to spend $1 billion to acquire an American lip-syncing app called Musical.ly in November 2017. This was a calculated masterstroke because Musical.ly had something ByteDance just didn't have: American user data. On the tech side, however, Musical.ly's technology was basic. Its algorithm sucked. So in 2018, ByteDance took all that Musical.ly user data, threw away the old code, shut down Musical.ly platform, and plugged the users directly into their own engine. And just like that, the TikTok we know today was born. From its launch in 2017 to surpassing Google as the most visited website in 2021, TikTok's rise wasn't luck. It was a carefully orchestrated takeover. Zhang's patience and desire to increase stickiness or user retention bordered on obsession. He mandated that every engineer and product manager study two specific books: Hooked, How to Build Habit-Forming Products, and Irresistible. And ByteDance built a specific piece of engineering architecture that Silicon Valley spent years trying to reverse engineer. It's called a Monolith, and to date, it is widely considered the most effective algorithm for capturing passive human attention ever built. In 2022, ByteDance engineers actually published a paper detailing this system titled Monolith, Real-Time Recommendation with Collisionless Embedding. Now, I know that sounds pretty technical, but stay with me because this is the nuclear code that's at the center of the TikTok sales negotiation. To understand why it's special, let's take a look at how US tech giants handled the data just a few years ago, specifically between 2016 and 2020. During that period, even the biggest servers struggled with memory limits. Imagine a post office with only 1,000 mailboxes, but 1 billion pieces of mail. To make it fit, engineers used a trick called hashing. They would essentially force rare interests to squeeze into the same box. So mail for John Smith goes to box 1. Mail for Jane Doe goes to box 2. But because they ran out of space, something totally random like, I don't know, mukbang ASMR might accidentally get shoved into box 1 as well. The system blurs the lines and just assumes that if you like John Smith, you must also want to hear someone slurping noodles just because they share a bucket. It creates noise, and this is why platforms like Facebook and Instagram used to recommend you totally random stuff. Back then, they were simply running out of memory slots. ByteDance looked at this and said, nah, we can do better. They built a system using what's known as collisionless embedding tables. Basically, they figured out a way to give the system infinite memory. How? By throwing away the fixed mailboxes entirely. Instead of trying to squeeze data into limited slots, the Monolith system creates a brand new specific slots for every single new thing you interact with on the fly. So John Smith gets his own unique ID. Mukbang ASMR gets his own unique ID. They never touch. The system knows exactly what they are and never confuses them. This is why TikTok feels almost telepathic. While YouTube is painting a portrait of you using a fat paintbrush, TikTok is using a laser printer. It has a higher resolution map of your psychology than any American social media platform because it never had to blur the edges to save memory. But the resolution is only half the story. The other half is speed. This is the second technical weapon inside the Monolith, real-time online learning. For years, platforms like YouTube used batch learning. Think of it like a student cramming for a test. The algorithm would watch you all day, collect the data, and then study it overnight. When you woke up the next morning, your recommendations would be updated. TikTok doesn't wait for overnight. It studies you in real time. This is called a loop. You stop on a video for 3 seconds. The data signal shoots to the server. The Monolith updates your profile model instantly, like in milliseconds. And the very next video you swipe to is already different because of that 3-second stop. This is why it feels so hard to put the phone down. The app isn't just reacting to you, it is having a conversation with you. If you get bored for a split second, it catches the micro signal and pivots immediately. Oh, he's bored of cats? Here's a car crash. Oh, he likes the crash. Here's a fight. It is a feedback loop so tight that it bypasses your conscious decision making. So hopefully by now you get why the Monolith is the greatest algorithm for capturing passive human attention. It's the engine that makes everything run. But what's even scarier is that ByteDance didn't just build a fast engine. They fine-tuned it with specific high-level logic. Specifically, ByteDance programmed the Monolith with 2 psychological rules that changed the game. First, they programmed it with what's referred to as Robin Hood logic. ByteDance engineers tweaked the code to ensure that even if you have 0 followers, your video has a chance to go viral. It basically gives every single user a lottery ticket to fame. The Monolith judges your content directly through a tiered traffic system that works like this. When you post a video, even if you have 0 followers, the Monolith throws it into a test pool of about 200 to 500 people. If those people watch it all the way through, the system unlocks the next tier, pushing it to 1,000 people. If they like it, it pushes it to the next tier of 10,000 people, and then 100,000. Can you see how a video could instantly get millions of views this way? On Instagram, you had to work for years to build a following. On TikTok, the Monolith can make you a star overnight, as long as your content is good enough to survive the arena. Second, the forced exploration. most algorithms try to keep you happy by showing you what you like and keep you in this sort of echo chamber. The monolith is programmed to deliberately show you things you don't like. If you're liberal, it'll occasionally slip in a conservative video. If you like sports, it'll sneak in a cooking video. Why? It is stress testing you. It's checking, has his personality or mood changed today? It forces you out of your bubble, finding new buttons to press to keep you addicted for another hour. At an internal celebration, Zhang told his staff that their goal wasn't just to play a finite game of winning users. It was to capture the only resource that truly matters: time. And this philosophy is how ByteDance was able to create a weapon so powerful that the US government decided it was a national security threat. Now, you might be asking, wait a minute, Google and Facebook have unlimited cash and the best engineers on the planet. Why couldn't they just build their own monolith with the infinite memory system? I had to look this up and came across this concept called technical debt. Think of Facebook's algorithm like a massive old Victorian mansion. It was built in 2010. It has millions of lines of old code, old plumbing, and old assumptions deeply buried in the foundation. To switch to collisionless tables, they would have to rip out the entire foundation of the house while billions of people were still living inside it. It was too risky. And frankly, they were making billions of dollars with the blurry version anyway, so why fix what makes money? On the other hand, ByteDance was the new kid on the block. They were building a new house from scratch in 2016. They didn't have any legacy code holding them back. They could build the entire infrastructure around the specific memory-heavy requirements from day one. Also, there's a cost. Infinite memory is incredibly expensive. For years, US tech companies optimized for profit margins, saving money on server costs by using hashing to compress data. ByteDance optimized for growth. They burned cash to keep those server costs high because they knew that telepathic accuracy was the only way to steal users away from Instagram. So it wasn't that Silicon Valley couldn't do it. It's just that for a long time, it was too expensive and too difficult to retrofit their old engines. And by the time they realized their mistake, TikTok was already the most downloaded app in the world. The result? TikTok forced the entire American tech industry to abandon their own strategies and become copycats. Instagram panicked and created Reels. YouTube created Shorts. In fact, thanks to Google's massive computing power, YouTube Shorts is getting close to reverse engineering the monolith and has caught up significantly on engagement and retention. Still, it's debatable whether Shorts is truly in the same league as TikTok when it comes to the power of its recommendation algorithm. This could explain why you might have noticed some changes to YouTube recommendations. Have you noticed recently that you basically never see videos from the channel that you actually subscribe to anymore? It's because your new TikTok-like algorithm, sort of like Monolith Lite, is now working hard to recommend seemingly random videos that it knows will hook your attention and increase your watch time, especially for YouTube Shorts. So let's circle back to the TikTok sale to the US now that you're more familiar with how the TikTok algorithm really works, because this knowledge becomes critical later. This is what we know about the deal so far from whatever is publicly available, and I have so many questions. First, the ownership structure. Under the agreement, ByteDance will transfer TikTok's US operations to a US consortium. This includes heavyweights like Oracle, Walmart, and investment firms like Zero Lake, A16Z, and likely BlackRock. The US consortium now holds 80% of TikTok, and ByteDance's stake will drop to just 20%. Legally and financially, this does give the US effective control of TikTok. The new board of directors will have 7 seats, and 6 of them will be Americans. ByteDance gets only 1. So in the boardroom, China has almost zero influence. As part of the deal, Oracle will also build a digital fortress in Austin, Texas, physically migrating all US user data out of ByteDance's proprietary servers and into Oracle's cloud data centers. Second, the price tag. The valuation being thrown around is roughly $14 billion for that 80% stake. Now, that might sound like a lot of money, but when you consider that Elon Musk bought Twitter for $44 billion, something doesn't add up. At the time of the purchase, Twitter was a platform with about 300 million users that was basically flatlining. TikTok, on the other hand, is the most culturally relevant app on the planet, with over 1.6 billion monthly users and around $10 billion in annual revenue in the US alone. In that context, a valuation of $14 billion sounds crazy low, when its true valuation is close to $100 billion, according to industry analysts. So why is the US getting it for such a steep discount? Is it just great bargaining by the US government flexing its muscles and China just caving? From our research, when you buy a tech company, you usually expect to get three things. The user data? Check. The brand name? Check. And the source code, aka the algorithm? But it turns out the US is not getting the algorithm as part of the sale. Instead, they're signing a licensing agreement. The new American company, officially named TikTok Global, will effectively be paying rent to ByteDance to use the Monolith engine. This means that despite conceding 80% of the ownership, ByteDance gets to keep the source code, and therefore the control of the algorithm in China. Do you see the significance of that? Because what was the entire justification for banning TikTok in the US in the first place? It was to prevent the American user data from being repatriated to China. Hence why the TikTok CEO Zhao was grilled in the US Congress hearing in early 2024. Because the US thought that China was influencing the minds of young Americans by owning their data. As part of the TikTok sale, it appears as though the US will really get to own the US user data. But that's not the end of the story, because owning the database only solves the issue of privacy if the US thinks that there is a problem of China spying on the US citizens. Just owning data completely fails to solve the issue of influence. By licensing the monolith instead of owning it, the US can control the input, that's the data, but leaves the logic in China. This creates a classic black box problem. Even if Oracle hosts the data in Texas and can help enforce takedowns or censorship of certain content at the platform level, it still has no real visibility into how decisions are being made inside the black box because it doesn't control the source code. They just cannot see the weights and parameters. In a neural network, billions of weights determine the importance of different signals. So if engineers at ByteDance were to push an algorithm update that suddenly tweaks those weights, for example, reducing the visibility of a specific political candidate by, say, 0.1%, just as a hypothetical, it would be virtually invisible to US auditors like Oracle. Yet, that microscopic change could still lead to a measurable shift in US culture over time. On the flip side, even without direct access to raw US user data, ByteDance can still own something just as valuable: the behavioral patterns. For example, the algorithm might learn that 19 to 24-year-olds in the US Midwest who watch finance memes for more than 3 seconds are unusually likely to engage with certain political themes. That kind of pattern, how people react, what hooks them, what keeps them watching, is a form of metadata that can be even more powerful than any individual user profile, because it can be reused, generalized, and even monetized. This is precisely why the Chinese government will not allow ByteDance to hand over the algorithm source code to the US under any circumstances, because they see the algorithm as a national security asset. On August 28, 2020, China's Ministry of Commerce and the Ministry of Science and Technology updated the catalog of technologies prohibited or restricted from export. This is a list usually reserved for things like missile guidance systems or nuclear centrifuge technology. They added a new category: personalized information recommendation services based on data analysis. Translation: the algorithm. And that's why the deal looks the way it does today. Now, if I had to take a guess, the private negotiations being held to finalize a deal right now are almost certainly focused on the licensing terms themselves and the fail-safe against the future algorithmic influence. Either way, it would be absolutely shocking if China ever agrees to hand over the algorithm's source code as part of this deal. But here's the thing: both sides can still claim a political victory. the US can say, hey, we secured American data privacy and picked up the biggest social media platform at a steep discount. And China can say, hey, we kept the source code, so we still own US user behavior. Just to play this out, here's something that could happen to TikTok down the road. TikTok's new US controlled version would keep running, but if China refuses to approve meaningful algorithmic updates from ByteDance, the model would either become frozen or become slower to respond to new trends and behaviors. Over time, TikTok would slowly turn into a zombie app with declining stickiness, and US users would simply move on to other platforms, which in the end might be great news for the American social media platforms that have been trying to catch up. Okay, so it looks like the TikTok sale will go ahead. The US buys the body, China keeps the brain, and everyone's happy. But let's zoom out a little bit. What if I told you that while this whole TikTok saga has been going on, the battlefield has already shifted? In China, something fascinating is happening. The dopamine era of doom scrolling and 60-second video addiction is actually starting to fade. Young Chinese users are getting tired of Douyin and are migrating to a new platform that is the exact opposite of TikTok. It's called Xiaohongshu or RedNote. In the West, it's widely known as RedNote. You might have heard about it when the US TikTok ban drama peaked in January 2025 and hundreds of thousands of so-called TikTok refugees briefly flooded into RedNote after Trump's executive order and the one-day TikTok outage. The funny thing was that RedNote was, and largely still is, a domestically focused Chinese app with a mostly Chinese language interface and features tuned for local users. So when international users suddenly piled in, many found there wasn't even a proper English experience ready for them yet. RedNote started as a simple shopping guide, but it has evolved into something much more powerful, a trust engine. While Douyin is filled with influencers screaming at you to buy things in 3 seconds, RedNote is filled with normal people writing 500-word reviews about which moisturizer actually works, or sharing detailed step-by-step itineraries for a trip to Tokyo. The difference is, again, in the algorithm. Douyin or TikTok's algorithm optimizes for watch time. It wants to keep you stuck in a trance. The RedNote algorithm optimizes for saves. It wants to be useful and give you something so valuable that you bookmark it to come back to later. For Gen Z Chinese, RedNote is now their primary search engine. They're trading dopamine for utility. They're trading entertainment for education. The irony here is that there's already an American platform people rely on as a trusted video library, where you can search and learn almost anything. It's YouTube. So if the Chinese social media consumption cycle is any indication, we are watching history move in a full circle. Phase 1 was social. Facebook and WeChat connected us to our friends. Phase 2 was dopamine. Douyin and TikTok got us addicted to mindless entertainment. Phase 3 could be utility, connecting us to answers. The explosive rise in the use of AI tools like ChatGPT and Perplexity is proof that more people now start by asking a question, steering the conversation, refining the answer, and then acting on it in real life. The Chinese market is already showing that eventually humans get sick of pure dopamine hits. The content has to become more and more extreme just to hold our attention because we build up a tolerance. At some point, most of us look up and think, wait, what the hell am I doing with my life? And start craving content that respects our intelligence instead of exploiting our attention span. And honestly, if you made it this far into this video, that alone says a lot about your intellectual curiosity. So the US government just spent 5 years and massive political energy to save TikTok. But what if all they really did was buy a blockbuster video store in the age of Netflix? Even if TikTok turns into a zombie app and fully degrades from 2026 onwards, we might not even care because the world will have moved on and users will have migrated from passive consumption to active learning. Maybe the final lesson in all this is that the algorithm, no matter how sophisticated or weaponized, is just a mirror. If we want dopamine, it'll give us more dopamine than we ever asked for. If you want education, it'll give us a shit ton of education. The algorithm only works if you keep feeding it your time. Maybe it's time we stop feeding the algorithm and start feeding our minds. If you found this video insightful, be sure to subscribe to Asian Boss and share it with your friends and colleagues, because this long-form explainer was never designed to be on TikTok, and by sharing, you can really help feed the YouTube algorithm to get this video in front of more people. By the way, don't forget to click on the description link to get the special discount CyberGhost VPN is offering. Again, I really want you to protect your data, and this app will do exactly that while you browse, and also give you full access to all the blog content on the internet for $2 a month only. Total risk-free, so check out the link in the description. You know, working on this video and doing the research really reminded me of how we started on this journey. Because Asian Boss has been going strong for over a decade, but from day one, there were so many people saying things like, YouTube is meant to be for entertainment. What are you doing? Trying to inform and educate the audience. I still get told that today, but isn't it funny how we've seen all kinds of entertainment-based channels and creators come and go, and we're still here, strong as ever, relevant as ever. We value intellectual curiosity, critical thinking, and above all, we truly believe that together we can and should be better than any mainstream media outlets when it comes to bringing you the most authentic, in-depth insights from Asia. Why? So that we can help bridge cultural understanding between Asia and the West and empower a future generation of leaders, creators, and entrepreneurs. That's our mission. We're not interested in taking sides or being political. If our mission resonates with you, then keep watching our videos and support us in any way you can, even by subscribing or sharing. Of course, I'm Stephen Park, and I thank you for watching this video until the end. As always, stay curious.